Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I got some funny news about Demi Lovato and being California sober. This today is a little bit about California. My wife told me about this though last night, and then one of my viewers sent me this link this morning. This is JoJo. Biden to propose capital gains tax of 39.6% to fund education and childcare, report says. Biden will seek to raise taxes on millionaire investors to fund education and other spending priorities. Biden will seek an increase in tax of capital gains to 39% for those Americans earning more than $1 million, according to reports. Reports say the president is expected to release the proposal formally next week. Capital gains tax is especially important to Wall Street since it dictates how large a chunk of equity sale is collected by the federal government. The White House declined to comment. Stocks slid on the news about the plan, with the S&P 500 index down 1%. The Dow Jones average and the Nasdaq both retreated by a similar magnitude. The proposal would make good on Biden's campaign promise to require Americans' wealthiest households to contribute more as a percentage of their income. The plan would bring capital gains tax and the top individual income tax rate, currently at 37%, to near parity. So what you're saying here is that the capital gains and income tax for people making, more money, people in the sort of upper middle class will be close to 40% on all their endeavors, right? So here it is. Capital gains tax is a tax on the growth in value of investments occurred when individuals and corporations sell those investments. And it also can be, your home, right? When you sell your home, let's say you're a person who lives in California and you realize California is completely effed, right? And you've worked hard and you've, accumulated some money in, business assets and stock assets, and your house, maybe your house is worth, let's say, $1 million. It's probably not now because everyone's leaving California. California and New York are becoming ghost cities, especially for wealthy people who are realizing, because of what they're doing with, businesses and taxes, because they have high tax rates in both of those states. And so people are getting taxed as much as like 60% of their income. And, it's just, everything's fallen apart in terms of with the police and so forth, right? So these places are, becoming ghost towns. People are buying property and land other places. And so, when you have your stock portfolio, and again, people say, well, these are all rich people, screw them. Well, those people are the ones that are going to invest in things like small businesses or just keep the economy going. And if they decide to hold everything, right, so they're going to be punished for selling off their stocks. If they sell $1 million home, 400,000 of it will go to the federal government. If they sell $1 million in stocks, 400,000 of it will go to the government. Plus, they'll have to pay income tax on all that stuff, right? And so basically, the government, and I said this was going to happen. There's real rich people. There's like Jeff Bezos, and then there's the people like, the Queen and the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, right, that are trillionaires. And then there's multiple millionaires like LeBron James, like people like that, who are, LeBron James is almost a billionaire, and you have, people who are less than, Alec Baldwin, $200 million. People are worth some millions of dollars. And those people will get around these types of things, one way or another. But then you have people who are worth a couple million or whatever it is. And that money is going to be worth nothing because of the amount of cash they're printing. And so those people who have, a lot to do with keeping the economy going are being stripped of their wealth. They're taking people's, whatever it is. They're going to take their pensions, Social Security is going to disappear. And so people who are worth, $1 million or 500,000 and they make, a little bit more than everybody else, they're going to be stripped of their money. Like it's just, they're trying to bring everybody down to a certain level. You're either in that top group or you're poor like everybody else. And these tax rates are hurting the economy. This isn't anything to do with really what they're saying it is about, because they can't tax people enough to get rid of the debt. So this is the national debt clock. I show this quite often. $28 trillion. So let's say all this tax revenue that JoJo is, proposing brings in another $1 trillion. It's not going to do anything to get rid of this, but here's the big numbers down here. This is the U.S. total debt, which is $86 trillion. So we're $86 trillion in debt. So that's $271,000 per person in America. That includes kids, the total population of 317 million people in America. That's 271,000 roughly per person, this collective debt. But on top of that, personal debt, people are in $21 trillion. Then there's the derivatives market and the currency printing, which is $620 trillion, which is, another crazy amount. And then there's unpaid liabilities of $162 trillion, right? And so $1 trillion in tax revenue isn't going to do anything to get rid of any of this debt, right? We're talking about over $250 billion of debt. And it's a quadrillion is such a large number that you can't wrap your mind around how big a number that is, right? So, and with all of this value, like people's $1 million is going to be worth nothing when this all plays out. Eventually, America isn't going to be the world's reserve currency anymore. And so because of that, everything's going to go south for America and Americans, right? And you have like a total tumbling of our system. And COVID had really nothing to do with it. COVID's going to be the excuse. I said this in the beginning. This is all about the economy and the debt. And that, America is being, Americans are being taken down to the level of everybody else. Americans are going to have to, suffer the same sort of, in terms of a hit to the lifestyle, because Americans are entitled. We all think we deserve to live the way we're living. And, it's based in debt and printing money and things like this that we don't have any concept of. Most people don't have any concept of it. And so they don't understand, that the system is, very fragile. And you've been told your whole life that our system is strong and that your lifestyle is guaranteed, and it's not. That we have a Ponzi scheme that has been running the world economy, and it's benefited America and Americans for a very long time, and other people and the world, the people who run the world are trying to find a way to break the bad news to Americans without having complete civil unrest and America go into the, crapper. But, that's why there's division, racial division, everything you see happening out there, the Trump and, the left and right battle and all, all the, everything that's happening is about the economy collapsing and depopulation. And those things are, upon us because of the system. The system is completely bankrupt on every level, especially spiritually and obviously economically. And it has to be taken down in some way. And they're trying to figure out a way to do it. And, their solutions suck because they don't really have a plan here. So then there's this. One of my friends on Facebook sent me this, and then there was an article about it in New York Post today. Demi Lovato posted pictures with a bong after friends said they didn't totally agree with her choice to not be completely sober. And so I guess I don't know, maybe there's what's that is, I don't know, alcohol, but here she is. Well, I guess that's her bong there. So somebody who almost died from an addiction, who made had a YouTube series about this, and she is what she's calling California sober. Then I saw this on Yahoo News. Demi Lovato defends her California sober approach to recovery.
But also California sober is extremely important.
You notice how when they put California in front of anything, it's worse, right? And fake and not real. And so, like, it's not real sobriety if you're smoking pot and drinking, right? Yeah, I'm California sober, right? I'm California honest. I only lie on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right?
Because that song represents an alternate path to the recovery that I've been taught the past 10 years.
An alternate path where you can be an addict and use alcohol and drugs, alcohol and pot, right? And so, both of those things impair your decision making, right? And so if you're someone trying to stay sober and you don't want to get into the heavy drugs that almost killed you, like in her case, somebody who's, had extreme drug addiction, right? Where your drug addiction almost kills you multiple times. And she's been in and out of recovery for her drug addiction and eating disorders and things like this. I mean, I've covered her recently. And so this idea that you can be moderate about the substances you use, and those substances will lead to, eventually getting back into more hardcore drugs. And so, that's why there needs to be like a complete sobriety, not a California sobriety.
So it just is like, it's not saying that this works for everybody.
Or that it works for anybody in the history of drug addiction, right? Like, name one person that nearly died from overdose and had a lifelong problem with substance abuse and addictive behaviors of all kinds. Eating disorders are another form of addiction. So name one person who had drug addiction and then they tried to be sober while using gateway drugs, drugs that would lead to more intense and addictive drugs that they already had a problem with. And so name one person, one case where California sober worked. Like, where it didn't end up leading them back to full-blown addiction. A person who has been an addict their whole life and suddenly develops the ability for moderation. A gambling addict or any kind of addict, that they somehow have the ability to be moderate in that activity. It just goes against everything, years of research and human history and human nature and the rest of it, right? Like, it just doesn't work. That will, it would be one in a zillion, and Demi isn't that one person, right? She isn't that one in a zillion person that can be moderate and use, some substances and not have it take over, especially if you hear her talk, because she's clearly lost and really, messed up. And so these things are oddly tied together, Demi Lovato and Joe Biden's tax policies. So first of all, there's no such thing as California sober, because sober means not to be under the influence of alcohol, and I guess it's now extended to drugs as well, right? So when you sober up, that means you're no longer under the effects of alcohol. And when somebody's an addict, when somebody has, addictions to drugs and alcohol, that's somebody who is lost control of their ability to manage their life, right? Demi Lovato, obviously somebody, she's got lots of issues. You hear her talk, she's so self-involved and kind of clueless. But pushing this idea that you can have that level of addiction that she has and still engage in, smoking some weed and drinking alcohol, like, and that calling that sober. I mean, with everything California, there's no rules or discipline, right? And you have to have discipline and rules in your life. I mean, it's, that's why when people say to me, the heartfulness meditation that I do is new age. Like, it's a spiritual discipline. Like, it starts off with a person trying the system, and there's no externalized discipline. There's no, you got to do this or else you're going to go to hell or whatever it is, right? There's no threats. There's no bribes. There's no incentives. There isn't somebody outside of you demanding, the master of the system, demanding that you behave in a better way, because it's an adult system. But the system itself, when you do the meditation and you engage in it, then you can't, you have to make a choice between things that are hurting you spiritually, things that are to do with your relationship with God, as opposed to, say, your relationship with drugs or your relationship with gambling. You got to make a choice between your relationship with God and your relationship with drugs or gambling or, being a liar or a cheater. I mean, whatever it is. And people struggle with this because they want to benefit and feel the energy from the heartfulness system, but they don't want to give up what they, what they enjoy in life, right? And again, it's not about enjoyment, it's about things that are deviant in some way. And the system treats you like an adult. Like, it's up to you to do it. It's up to you to engage in the system and do the meditation. It's up to you to, get rid of whatever things that are in your path, blocking your path, your spiritual path and connection to God. So it's not some, there's no like imposition. You see this with religions and, other types of methods. There's no imposition and forcing you to give up what you, know deep down that you have to give up, or you have to mature into an adult and, make a choice. Just like with your marital relationships and your relationships with your kids, you're going to find that down the road, your relationship with drugs and alcohol or whatever it might be, like, could be anything, relationship with, watching sports for, watching 3 games of football on Sunday and neglecting your wife and your kids, right? And so, they need attention, they need things. And so you work all week and then you spend your time with your boys, watching sports or golfing or whatever. And your wife's like, I don't get any time with you. And your kids are like, you don't even know them, right? And so you have to make a choice between, things that you want to enjoy, things that you, consider pleasurable activities, and your duties and things like this. And in California, they, proposed this Oprah Winfrey way of looking at spirituality, this new age model that you can have it both, right? You can indulge in drugs and alcohol, but also have a relationship with God. And it simply isn't the case, right? I gave this example of this story that there was some, I think they were European, practitioners of the heartfulness system, and they went to Babaji's house, like, back in, the 70s or whatever it is, right? Babaji lived in northern India, and his successor, Master Charji, who was the secretary of the mission, and, he was very, he was people knew that he was going to be the successor to Babaji. And so they took a train, these 2 guys left Babaji's house and took a train down to see Master Charji in Chennai, where he lived in southern India, right, in Tamil Nadu. And so they wanted to get a meditative sitting from him. And so they sat across from him, and they closed their eyes and started to meditate. And he started to read their spiritual condition, which happens, the trainer reads the person's spiritual condition and sees what needs to be cleaned out. And their system was completely gross, right? There was just so much spiritual grossness there. And he, after the sitting, said, "What are you guys doing, right? What are you guys doing on the train?" And they said, "Why? Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, when you left Babaji's house, because when anybody went to see Babaji, he would clean out anything that could be cleaned out, right? And these guys had been practicing heartfulness for a while, so their conditions would be better. Their internal world would not be filled with grossness like it was." He said, Babaji would clean you and you'd be in a pristine condition. So you did something on the train between here and there to accumulate this grossness. And they said, "Yeah, we bought some hash and we smoked it," right? And so that, uses of drugs contaminated their spiritual condition. There's people using LSD. I mean, I heard from all these, a lot of these hippies, they went to India to find spirituality, but they're still using drugs. And I talked to some of these old timers, and they told me their stories and things. And there was, I guess the guy who started me, he was one of these people, and he said, they were in America, they were rolling out beers at a gathering and things like, that just seem ridiculous to me now. And, one of the things was Babaji used to say, "Only forbidden is forbidden," because he didn't want to make the heartfulness system like some sort of fire and brimstone with this idea of a punishing God and things like this. And he said, he didn't want people adding the sin of drinking alcohol, adding to it the disobedience of the master of the system, where he would say, "Don't drink," and they would drink. So that was another way they would be, they would have this spiritual grossness, and they would feel whatever guilt and shame and embarrassment and things. So he said only forbidden is forbidden. And so, but he underestimated people's capacity for depravity, right? Because he just, he looked at people he saw their potential. He looked at them as their spiritual potential, what they could be, what their best possible spiritual essence would be as a human being, right? And so, he went to Master Chargy as he grew older and said, you're going to have to bring discipline to this mission. I made a mess of this mission because I have been too soft with people, right? And just, the whole forbidden thing, people used it as a sort of, we can do whatever we want. And they were accumulating grossness, and they were, using LSD and things, which is really harmful to someone's spiritual, their subtle bodies and things. And so there was a gathering. This guy who started me said he was at this gathering, and people were drinking, and Chargy said, you guys aren't supposed to be doing this. And they said, no, Babaji said only forbidden is forbidden. And he said, well, go ask him, right? And Babaji said, well, in terms of the use of alcohol, if a doctor says that you need it for some reason, then yes, otherwise not, right? He said in a very sort of gentle way. But there is, choices that have to be made, and people, you should be sensitive enough to realize, oh, I have to give this up. Like, you should feel in your system, like people who do the heartfulness meditation, not at first, but as the years go by, that these behaviors are getting in your way of your spiritual evolution. But in the New Age movement, and something coming from like California spirituality, California sober, right, all these things that are being exported from California, do whatever you want. And the way that they're, all these social agendas that you've seen them roll out, you know what I'm talking about, the last couple of years, and they're just making things up, right? And they think that whatever they think is coming from God. Oh, if I thought it, God must have, And you have to differentiate between your ego and what you want to think and what you want to hear, because people say they hear God's voice, and maybe they do, but after a while it's their ego talking to them, or some other disembodied soul that is, out to create chaos and, problems here on planet Earth. So there's a lot of this stuff in the New Age movement where people think they're being spiritual, but they're just, completely clowning themselves, right? And so, with that, we see that California has the effects of California, and that, Gary Newsom, whatever his name is, Governor Newsom, the guy with the mullet, and his horrible policies during the COVID. I mean, almost you have to call his stuff worse than Andrew Cuomo. But New York and California being run into the ground, and maybe that's being done intentionally, and people are flooding out of the state. They might say that they want Biden and they didn't want Trump, but they don't want to pay those taxes. I mean, no one wants to pay, 60% of their income in taxes, and now with the capital gains. And so they have this overpriced California property that's plummeting. And so they're going to Texas and Florida, all these, right-leaning states, South Carolina and North Carolina. They're going to these states, I guess Georgia to some extent, these places that they didn't want to fly over states, and places that are, leaning Republican. And they're going there because they don't want to be in California, New York anymore. They're flooding these states, right? And they, they want states that have less restrictions, and, they want the protection of the police. They might, on social media, they'll claim that they don't, but rich people want the protection of the police. And now, Biden's just glomming all of their, if they're selling their houses in California and purging out assets because they don't, they need to, bring some income so they can change locations and set up business somewhere else, right? I mean, Silicon Valley is moving elsewhere. All these, companies, they're not going to make movies in Hollywood anymore. I mean, California is going to be a ghost town. Like, it's just too expensive there to do everything, and it's just a mess, right, on every possible level. I mean, it's going to be like Escape from New York and Escape from L.A., right, those movies where they turn them into prisons, right, and the people are left there without any law and order, and they're just, fenced in, and they are going to, just survive on their own. They'll drop, supplies in there or whatever, helicopter drop, because no trucks are going to go in there. No one's going to want to be in those places. I mean, that's what they're heading for. And think about that. Like, how quickly things are deteriorating. Like in 2019, the economy was up. It looked like the economy was up, and things were going in a positive direction. They roll out COVID, which again is a smokescreen for the economic collapse and, depopulation and things like this. And the next thing you know, we're talking about when you're taxing 40% of people's, and you say, well, it's just the rich people. Well, doesn't everybody want to be rich at some point? Like, they're de-incentivizing, making $1 million a year is a lot. But if they take 36% of that in taxes, $360,000. And then they take your other assets, 40% of any other assets you sell off. Then you're, it's basically, and then you think about the state taxes and all these other things. Before you know it, like you're getting, less than half of what you've earned. And so you're like, well, I might as well earn less money and be in a lower tax bracket, right? There's no incentive to being rich. And then people just stop trying. Like if one of the, motivating factors for everybody is like someday you can be a millionaire or whatever it is, right? And again, I don't think that's a real goal. It should be a real goal. Like you should, make as much money as you can, but being focused on money is always going to bring you, pain and suffering, being a materialistic person. But that's something that, it's an engine, people's belief that they can rise to the top of the economic system. Everyone believes they can be rich and famous in some way. And you take that away, you see people not even wanting to work now because they've got a taste of living at home and they're on unemployment. And there's all these jobs that are left open. I, read a couple articles, mainstream media articles about this. So people, the jobs are there, some of them good jobs, and people don't want to take them, right? They think, all right, they'll just be supported by the system, and they just don't want to go back into the workforce. And there's so many people that are freaked out about COVID. I mean, so many people have just made stuff up. Like they're not even, as fear-based as the CDC and the medical community is, and the media community is about COVID, there are people who are way worse, right? They're wearing, 7 masks. I mean, they're, and they're young people who are paranoid and think they're going to die, even though very few young people are even getting it. They don't even get, severe cases. And like I said, having it sucks. Like, I don't want it again, right? I mean, it was probably one of the worst illnesses I went through. It sucks, whatever. But in terms of people dying, it's a lot of people are killed by the respirators and, other things that are going on in their lives, But people are so freaked out by it, and it's such a fear-based, and they're eating Twinkies and they're eating processed foods that are totally going to kill them, right? And so, it's just just the ignorance of people on the right and the left. I mean, you go into Walmart anywhere, you just look around, you're like, oh my God, right? What's happened to the human race in America? It's just, people are dumbed down, and it's just not going in the right direction. And so, there has to be a change. The system is collapsing because people are de-evolving right in front of you. Everyone's getting stupider and worse character qualities, can't sustain relationships or work or jobs and things like this. I mean, Americans are getting outworked. There's some people that are, it's physical labor. That's why, they're bringing people in to do physical labor because Americans won't do it. And they're bringing people in to do, technical labor and other things like this, the high-tech jobs, because American kids don't want to do math, right? The sense of entitlement here. This happens in every empire, that people grow up with wealth and privilege. Everyone's living like kings, even though they don't understand they are, because they don't understand how the rest of the world is living. And they think they're entitled to that lifestyle without doing anything about it. Now, you have like somebody with a lot of drive and ambition, and he becomes a multimillionaire or a woman or whatever, and they have a family, they have kids, and the kids grow up in wealth, and they're entitled, they don't work hard, they don't have a sense of it, right? They just think you're born to it and you're just supposed to be given it. And that's America right now. And so, and California is like leading the way. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.